Alright guys, welcome to my short introduction to playing Garganacl in VGC Regulation H. So I am by no means a Garganacl expert, but I hope you can probably learn something from this because I did a bit of research about Garganacl. And the reason why I'm making a video about Garganacl today is because Garganacl just won a regional. So Stefan Mott, or you might know him as Pengy, he won the Monterey Regionals recently, I think last weekend. So his team featured a lot of cool pieces like the AV Terrafire Incineroar, the Scyther obviously, and the Garganacl, the Maranka Berry Garganacl. So it's quite an interesting team and it kind of put Garganacl into the spotlight, which is why I wanted to make a video about Garganacl. Because I think Garganacl has quite a lot of potential in this format. So, what does Garganacl do? Basically, for most teams that involve or have a Garganacl, its main role would be chip opponents with Salt Cure. Because if you guys didn't know, Salt Cure, it's a normal 40 base power rock type move, but after it hits, every turn, the opponent's health is removed by 1/8. Yeah, so 1/8 of the opponent's health is removed every turn. So it's basically like a stronger poison. And basically, Garganacl's another role that Garganacl can play is it just lifts hits and just it can last on the field for a very long time, especially with recover. And the thing about just having Garganacl on the field, it puts so much pressure on the opponent to commit their resources into attacking the Garganacl and removing it so that they won't have to deal with the annoying Salt Cure chip. But the thing is, Garganacl is actually really hard to remove. It's a very, very bulky Pokemon, especially on the physical side. And you can probably tell by just looking at this guy, you can probably tell he's quite hard to remove. He's very bulky. So basically, when you force your opponents to commit attacks into the Garganacl, your partners can just start dealing a lot of damage because if they want to remove the Garganacl, they can't remove your partner. And if they want to remove your partner, the Garganacl will put a lot of pressure on them because Salt Cure is just really annoying to deal with. And the chip damage is really devastating, especially since you don't want to just be passively losing health every turn. Which is obviously really bad for the rest of the game when you like just spend 2-3 turns trying to remove Garganacl and you already lose half your health. It's quite detrimental for your game plan going ahead in the rest of the game, which is why I think Garganacl is honestly really good. I mean, Garganacl falls off quite hard when he can start dying to random stuff. Like, let's say if we played Garganacl in Reg G, that would be stuff like the Urshifus and the Kyogres. So Garganacl can't really survive there because he just gets destroyed. But now that we are in Reg H, Garganacl definitely has some potential, especially with all especially the lower power level basically. So Garganacl can put opponents in range of attacks from the faster attacker. So let's say like you have a Golden Goal, you just lead your Garganacl with some support, get Salt Cure, chip damage, and you basically get a lot of chip damage because Garganacl survives for so long. And then once your Garganacl dies, your Goldengo can come in and sweep the rest of the game because everything is in range of a Make It Rain. So that's actually quite interesting. That's basically the main play style you want to look out for when playing Garganacl. So here are some sets that you can use. First, obviously, we have the Stefan Mott Monterey set, the certain set that he used at Monterey just recently. The EV spread is just, I came up with something random because, I'm too lazy to go and actually look at the calcs. But Maranka Berry does something quite interesting. It increases your special defense by 1 stage when you're hit with a special move. So that's actually really useful because Garganacl is more bulky on the physical side and not on the special side. So you want to shore up that special defense especially. So Maranka Berry is really helpful in that department. And you have the Salt Cure, obviously. Every Garganacl needs Salt Cure. Stealth Rock, which is actually really useful because when you have Salt Cure on your like when you have the sword cure on your Pokemon, you kind of want to switch out to remove that condition, right? So the Stealth Rock basically punishes switches. If you guys don't know what Stealth Rock is, or if you guys never played singles before, Stealth Rock basically does chip damage to any Pokemon that switches in. So basically it's like stepping on Legos. You just lose a bit of your health every time you come in. And it depends on what type you are, because Stealth Rocks deals more damage based on, I think, the rock type offensive spread. So let's say you're a fire bug like Volcarona, you take a lot more damage from Stealth Rock than, let's say, a steel type like Goldengo. Just an example. So Stealth Rock is very useful because there's a lot of Pokemon weak to rock that are switching in and out nowadays. First thing I would definitely highlight is the Incineroar. That's why Incineroar isn't that good in singles, because if you want, Incineroar really relies on switching in and out to activate those intimidates multiple times. And since Stealth Rocks is so good in singles, that's why Incineroar can't thrive there. But so now that we have the Stealth Rocks on the Garganacl, you can find a way to punish the Incineroar Fake Out and Intimidate cycling. And also Dragonite. Dragonite is quite annoying to deal with in this format. So having that little bit of chip to make the taking down the Dragonite easier is actually really good. And obviously the chip can break Sash from Sneasler, Alolan Ninetales, etc, etc. So Stealth Rocks are actually really good to have on the Garganacl. So recover, obviously you can recover your health, that's self-explanatory. You want to stay on the field as long as possible. And if you want to have a matchup check into Sun teams or Size Spam, or you just need a really bulky White Guard user, consider Garganacl, because Garganacl gets White Guard. And especially against Sun teams, I think Garganacl really shits on Sun teams. So if your team is looking for a counter to Sun but that also needs White Guard, if you have this specific role to play, you can get a Garganacl. So next, let's look at what Purifying Salt does, because a main part of why Garganacl is so good is its ability. So the first part of this ability, Purifying Salt, grants immunity to status conditions. So anything like Paralyze, Poison, Sleep, and Freeze. So obviously, Sneasler kind of hates this guy. Yeah, and it also halves damage from Ghost type moves. So it actually doesn't say that it's not very effective, but Ghost type moves, all damage from Ghost type moves is halved. So for people that don't know what Purifying Salt does, they might be surprised to see that their Ghost type moves like the Rage Face and Last Respect are doing so little. So it's just a little tech or little piece of information that can help you. It's actually quite useful because there's a lot of... Damn, my neighbors are doing construction out there. But anyways, yeah, there's a lot of strong Ghost type moves in this format, like the aforementioned Last Respects. So I think Garganacl has a good place in this format. And here's some useful information about Garganacl. While Sword Cure removes 1/8 of the opponent's health per turn, if they are Water or Steel type, it removes 1/4 of their health instead. So let's just say that once you Terra out of the Water weakness, Basculegion and Goldengo have a really, really hard time. So here are some good matchups for Garganacl. Firstly, like I said, is Sun. Garganacl as a rock type can resist and tank those eruptions from Torkoal or Typhlosion. And it obviously destroys Charizard and Jumpluff because rock destroys fire and flying types. And Sword Cure just does a lot of damage. And it basically invalidates the Torkoal, Jumpluff, and Torkoal Charizard leads, because behind let's talk about the Torkoal and Jumpluff first. Jumpluff basically doesn't have a lot of offensive pressure on its own. Its main role is to use Sleep Powder and support the Torkoal. So let's say you just get a sleep on a really offensive Pokemon that can threaten your Torkoal. Once you get that sleep down, the Torkoal is free to just do damage without being worried about being knocked out. So that's really good, usually, except when you're facing a Garganacl, because of Purifying Salt, you can't be put to sleep because of Sleep Powder. So Torkoal is actually gonna have a really hard time when Garganacl is wide awake and hitting it with Sword Cure. So that's why Torkoal and Jump Off is a very bad lead into Garganacl. And Torkoal Charizard for obvious reasons, Charizard just doesn't do well into rock types, being a fire and flying type. So next we have Dondozo. When you Terra out of the water weakness with Garganacl, let's say you go for a Terra Poison or Terra Flying, it is quite easy to 1v1 a Dondozo because usually Dondozo, they are quite bulky, especially with the boost from Tatsugiri. They are very annoying to remove. So having that Sword Cure is actually really good because Sword Cure does fix damage regardless of bulk. And when Dondozo is on the field boosted by Tatsugiri, it can't switch out to remove the Sword Cure. So basically you put Dondozo on a timer and you don't have to worry so much about Dondozo healing and recovering and being impossible to remove. So yeah, Dondozo is a really good matchup, especially because it's a water type. If it doesn't Terra, it will take a lot of damage from Sword Cure. And lastly, Sneasler. Sneasler already isn't a very strong physical attacker, especially most Sneaslers in this format. I would say they aren't running Adamant, so they won't be doing a lot of damage to Garganacl. Especially if you Terra to a like flying or poison, they basically can't hit you for any meaningful damage, and they can't even cheese you with Dire Claw because you can't be statused, so you can't even be put to sleep or paralyzed or poisoned. So Sneasler is quite bad into Garganacl as long as you remove the rock type weakness with your Terra. So I would say a lot of these matchups, Garganacl does like that Terra, and it may be a bit of a Terra sink if you wanna solely rely on Garganacl to, let's say, deal with the Dondozo. So just keep in mind. So here are some bad matchups for Garganacl. The main one that I want to talk about is Annihilate. Obviously, like I said, Garg is very bad if it can't live hits and it can't survive to deal chip damage. So Final Gambit Annihilate is obviously really bad because Final Gambit, if you guys didn't know, it deals damage equal to the user's current HP, and Annihilate, I believe, has a higher HP stat than Garganacl. But even if it doesn't, it still does a lot of damage. So yeah, basically Annihilate does pretty well into Garganacl. And it also dies to a +2 Drain Punch and a close combat. I think, I'm not exactly sure about the calcs, but I was playing Garganacl a bit on ladder. Damn, my neighbors are like going crazy out there with the construction. But yeah, Garganacl is, when you don't Terra out of the fighting weakness, you can go down to like a +2 Drain Punch or a +1 Drain Punch. Especially, the main thing about playing Garganacl is you can't overestimate its physical bulk. Like, it may have a 150 defense, but you can't take that for granted. So Annihilate definitely has some ways to remove the Garganacl. Obviously Mouse Ape is really annoying because those mouse holds usually are carrying taunt. And when you taunt the Garganacl, you can't recover and you can't click Protect or White Guard or Stealth Rocks. So that's really annoying for Garganacl. It's just stuck clicking a 40 base power move that doesn't actually deal additional damage, because when you Sword Cure and you Sword Cure twice, the second time it just does the 40 base power rock type damage and it doesn't actually add on to the chip damage that the opponent is taking every turn. So yeah, taunt is really hard for Garganacl to deal with. And some other things that destroy Garganacl, I would say, setup. You can take 1 or 2 turns to click Swords Dance against Garganacl because he can't really deal a lot of immediately threatening damage. So you maximum take like 1/4 or 1/2 of your damage from Sword Cure, then you can fire back and basically one-shot Garganacl. So things like the Swords Dance King Gambit and the Garchomp, or a Rillaboom with Bullet Seed activating Archaeodon's Stamina and Body Press, that's a potential threat as well. And you basically can't, like, let's say you're running Terra Flying on the Garganacl, you can't Terra out of your weakness to Body Press because then you leave yourself exposed to Electro Shot. And finally, we have the Covert Cloak Volcarona. Mainly because Volcarona, when you Terra out of the 4 times rock weakness, Garganacl basically can't do any damage to you because Covert Cloak prevents the secondary effect of the Sword Cure chip every turn. So Garganacl is forced to just click the 40 base power rock type move, which obviously does minimal damage if Volcarona is Terra, and it basically allows Volcarona to set up and then fire back at the Garganacl. So that's really one of the more tough matchups for this Pokemon. Now, these are some of the teammates for Garganacl. Obviously, he's not a one-man show. You can't just boot up ladder, take a Garganacl on your team, just with nothing else, and just go on ladder and win games. This is obviously VGC is a team sport. So, here are some partners for Garganacl that you may consider. Obviously, firstly, we have the fast and strong attackers to sweep up the games after Garganacl, is annoying and deals a lot of chip damage. So consider Gholdengo or Dragapult, because I would say Gholdengo is very strong because of Make It Rain, very strong spread move that can pick up KOs, especially with the chip damage. And Dragapult is really good because Dragon Darts is a spread move, technically it's a spread move, but it only does 50 damage onto each person. So the chip damage can basically help guarantee those KOs for Dragapult. Another partner that you may consider is Incineroar. Incineroar with Intimidate obviously just makes Garganacl even harder to remove. Screen Setters, basically the main idea is to just make Garganacl as hard to remove as possible, and screens obviously help with that, so you want to consider like Ninetales or Grimmsnarl. And finally, like we saw in Stefan Mott's team just now, we have the Scyther. Scyther surprisingly does well into Annihilate, not only because of flying stat, but because Garganacl, really hates Annihilate, and Scyther benefits from having the Eviolite, so it can tank a few hits for the Garganacl and just deal back strong flying type damage in the dual wing beat. So yeah, I think Scyther pairs with Garganacl quite well. And I think Scyther is quite well positioned in this format, especially because of the bug flying type. It's actually not that bad of a defensive typing. It puts you in a good position against those Earthquake spams like Ursaluna and the Garchomp. And obviously against the Ape, you put a lot of pressure to force the Terra, and usually these small apes like to run Terra Fire or Terra Grass. So then you can pressure back with the Garganacl. So yeah, Scyther is actually quite a interesting teammate and actually very useful to pair up with Garganacl. So in conclusion, Garganacl is very very strong in this format. So I hope my video has convinced you about that point. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you guys have learned something about Garganacl through my very haphazard speaking style.